You are currently the only person in this conference. You are currently the only person in this conference. You are currently the only person in this conference.
Hello everybody, just seeing if you can hear me and see me. Yay! You know, I won't leave this camera on the whole time. And the light behind me looks like I've got a halo, which is quite nice, but probably not true. I move too much, Siggy. It wouldn't be good for the bandwidth. I can't help but move my hands around. So I'm sitting on them as we speak. But once they get going, I won't trust myself. Thanks, Julian. Yay, someone's found the Becky badge. I was going to give you a terrible photo of me as my Becky badge, but I didn't bother kind of doing that in the end. I thought I'd give you one that says Moo, which is the beginning of our Moodle logo. But thanks to Julian for quickly showing us in his previous session how to make a badge. I followed along and quickly made one for this course because I could see how much everyone was inspired by a badge. Thanks, Julian. The campus photo I thought I'd better just stick on my mirror behind me to make it look a bit more corporate as I'm at home, not in work at 10 o'clock at night. But one of my staff kind of drew it, which is quite amazing. So yes, it's quite pretty. In my office, actually, I have a lovely mural that's really, really long, which has got all local highlights and things in it, as well as the college, which would have been even nicer behind me, but maybe another session. Is the sound level okay? Is it loud enough for everyone? Oh, you know. If only, Siggy. I was so tempted to go on the wine whilst I was waiting this evening and watching all the presentations, but I talk fast enough as it is, and if I had a glass of wine, I'd be much too fast. So I thought I'd better stick with the water. I'll have a wine afterwards. And you'll all have to tell me to slow down if I'm talking too fast, please. G'day, thanks, Siggy. Someone just managed to get a hyperlink into this chat box, Don. I've just tried to do that and it wouldn't go in at all. Could it be to do with the fact that we're on Mac and Firefox? Control V.
Hi, Rebecca. This is Fred. So
Hi.
if you want to paste something in, you can instead of pasting it, just right-click inside the chat box and then choose paste.
You have to right-click on a Mac. There we go. Don't use it very often. Hey, thank you. It was the Control V that was getting me. If you haven't, oh, actually, you don't want the report. I'll ignore that link. If you haven't done the choice yet, which is just asking you about whether you are more blended learning, distance learning, or both, run in and do it. It doesn't matter if you don't, but it's just nice to get an idea about how many people are using Moodle completely as a delivery tool and how many people are using it in blended learning, so like in schools and FE and HE, so a bit of Moodle and a bit of classroom teaching, or how many people are doing both. At the moment, I think the blended approach is the most popular one, or the most commonly found one. Oh no, but the both is catching up. So not many people use it exclusively for distance learning, according to this very short sample, small sample, 2 people with distance learning. But it just gives me an idea so that I can try and tailor it a little bit. Personally, I'm blended learning, and I do a bit of both. I do a little bit of distance learning, but mostly I support and use teachers to use Moodle. But I'll give me a proper intro in a minute once we properly get started.
Yeah, hi all, it's Shane here. Just thought I'd jump in and probably get the session started. If that's okay, Becky. So I just want to start off by saying thank you, Becky, for giving your time up. Realise it's very late for you, so much appreciated. And obviously very early for some people and middle of the day for others, so thank you to everyone for turning up. And I just want to welcome everyone to our third keynote. Just a word, and part of the iMoot team, one of the things we really want to do is get people from an education kind of side of things too, which is where Becky feels a great, I guess, a gap that we had in the program. And so really looking forward to having her here and her take on the learning, e-learning, or I shouldn't say e-learning now, after listening to Julian's one yesterday. But listening to her take on it all. So Becky, thank you very much for your time and for sharing with us today. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, hello everybody. Good evening, good morning, good day, whichever it means for you. Thank you very much. I was very pleased to be asked to do a keynote. A little bit nervous, I have to admit. I'm a Moodler. I do Moodle. I use Moodle. I'm not an expert. I am just someone who uses it and loves it. So my presentation is going to be a little bit kind of about the background, the technology, the reasons for using technology for particularly supporting learning, but I will be focusing on the practicalities and how we actually do it. I'm not going to keep this screen on because I'm too busy looking at myself down there for a start. I'd rather focus on the presentation. I'll switch it back on again at the end of the session for kind of questions and things. So I'm going to wave goodbye and turn off my webcam, and I'll come back on that later. So the session, I couldn't decide quite what to call the session. It was originally called Learning by Doing when I originally thought about it. And then English is a massive thing in the UK at the moment. We're really embedding English, and we were talking about verbs and nouns, which I'm going to come on to in a little bit. And someone said, I Moodle, they Moodle, we Moodle. I thought, oh, that's quite nice, quite like that. So I stuck with that because it really is all about the L in Moodle, the learning, and that's what I want to focus on. And if I Moodle, then the students can Moodle, and then we can all Moodle together and hopefully collaborate a bit. So that's a kind of rough overview of a little bit what I'm talking about, but I'll kind of introduce it a little bit more in a moment. So first of all, I've already done this bit. So I've already asked you kind of whether you are distance learning or online learning, and I've added in both as well now for some people. And I'm just going to quickly refresh my screen here to see what the latest response is. So at the moment we've got 12 people who have said that they are both, 9 who say they're predominantly blended learning, and 4 who say they were distance learning. And I'm going to cover all of it in this presentation, and I'm going to start off mostly with the distance learning and then look at how we can apply those benefits to the blended learning approach. So before I do that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I work at South Devon College, so that's in South Devon, so in the UK, right at the bottom in the triangle. And I've been there since the year 2000, so I'm in the 13th year at the college, and we've been using Moodle since 2005. We manage it in-house. I've got a really good team. Some of you may know Paul Vaughan, and he's my kind of Moodle guy, so whenever I want something, he does it, because I'm not technical in any way whatsoever. I just figure out how to use Moodle. And then we have about over 800 courses. Predominantly our students are 16 to 18, but we have some university level students, and we have some 14-year-olds and school age children. So it's quite a range of people and students who use it, and we also use it for staff development, as most places do. And my role is to support Moodle, really develop it, promote it, encourage its use across the college, and really use it to support learning, as well as using technology in general to support learning. And it's that background of helping others to use it that my presentation is based on, and just thinking about some of the challenges of using Moodle and some of the issues and how we can address them. And by doing the presentation, I've come up with some new ideas that I'm going to try as well, so I shall share those with you. So I started off, like I say, English is quite a big thing for us in England, as you'd expect, because we're not very good at proper spelling and grammar. So I started thinking about, I've seen the old the Moodle with Lego video on YouTube, which is excellent, and it starts off with this kind of noun and verb. So I thought I'd start with that as well. So we all know Moodle. We wouldn't be here if we didn't know Moodle. And it's essentially a system. It's title and name for a system that can do lots of different things. And then the verb of it, if you Google it, and you can see the link I Googled it on, is to dawdle aimlessly, to idle time away, the process of lazily meandering through something, an enjoyable tinkering that may lead to insight and creativity. And I particularly like that one. And that's how I learnt Moodle, actually. I Moodled through it. No one's taught me anything about Moodle. I just figured it out for myself. I've pressed buttons and seen what it can do. And I feel very pleased I've done that, and it's not that hard to do if you've kind of got the confidence to give it a go. But that's kind of Moodle, but I kind of wanted to take it a bit of a step further, because should learning be all about wandering aimlessly through an online system or the internet? I don't know that it should be. I certainly hope that doing this kind of working through an online course that we enable insight and creativity. But how can we make this happen? Will a student wander aimlessly through a Moodle course and come out the other end with a qualification? The aimlessly, maybe, but the aim is that they're learning through it. So this presentation is really going to be looking at how we can develop a structure online. I'm really going to focus on, some of my text is missing from this slide, I'm very sorry. So the presentation is going to really look at how we can develop and structure online courses to ensure that the learning can occur. And I'm going to focus on the distance and online learning first, and then apply it to blended learning approaches. And then I'm going to be looking at how Moodle specifically supports it, and particularly some activity and things that people support that supports learning. So I've got a terrible image here, I'm afraid, and I apologise to Martin who sees this. And this was at the Moodle Moot in Ireland in this February, was it? And this was a quick picture taken, very blurrily, very hastily taken on my iPad. And it says Moodle's not used well, and 80% of the teachers use 20% of the features. How many people think that's true in their organisation? There's a little hands up icon on the left-hand side underneath your names. Anybody feel that this might be true in their organisation and brave enough to say whether it is or not? There's some hands up. A few hands there. Oh, that 20% seems high for some of our staff. I think, we're recognised as using Moodle quite well at South Devon College, but even we couldn't say for sure that actually everybody is using Moodle to its full capacity, because they're not. And I don't think even I, as probably the most heavily adopted user of Moodle in the organisation, uses all of the features. So it's not really that unsurprising, because Moodle does have so much to offer. And also teachers do have so much to do. The teachers are experts in their field, and that's what their expertise, and they feel comfortable in the classroom. That's what they were trained to do. And one would hope with the kind of new generations coming through that might change slightly, but it's still the teacher taking control that is often the kind of the leading factor as to what happens in the classroom. And learning all the things in Moodle does take time, and the CPD that we offer very often focuses on the function, so what a lesson is, what a forum is, what a glossary is, rather than the learning and kind of how it can support it. And I'm guilty of that myself. That is how we deliver it, even if we are giving practical ideas of how we can actually use it. I'm not sure that we always focus on learning enough. We just use that as a kind of the application, giving them ideas of what to use. And the starting point for a lot of teachers is adding content, and usually that content is things that already exist, your PowerPoint presentations and documents that already exist. And that is a very natural thing to do. And I'm sure this does look familiar to a lot of people. You can put your hands up if you think that that does look familiar. This is a real course. I won't, of course, say which course or who it is, but that's, that still exists in our organisation, and it is the first thing that people do. It's the first thing we teach people. Not anymore, I have to say. We don't tend to teach people that straight away. Now we teach them books and pages, which I'll come on to later. But certainly, and since the last 6 months, that is what we've taught to do. And with the lovely drag and drop upload, so it makes it even easier to do that and add it all on there. And I love drag and drop upload, but it just could increase this a little bit more. But I completely agree with Siggy as well, but this is a starting point. And I don't think it's a bad thing in itself. I remember first starting teaching, and I remember passing a floppy disk around to pass the single file that I wanted them to look at on the computers. Anybody else remember doing that? So I had one floppy disk, and I passed it around to each student. They plugged it in, took the file off, put it on the computer, took the floppy disk out, passed it on to the next person. Well, if that makes just sharing the resource easier, then I'm not against it, but we can do so much more. So that's really what we're going to kind of look at now a little bit. Past the memory stick hold well after my days, Gareth. So, but Moodle can do so much more. It's got all these other things in it. I'm not going to go through all of these now. I'm going to refer to quite a few of them. We saw some lessons today in the games-based stuff. We've seen sessions and workshops. We've seen Mahara, which isn't on here, but it comes up later. So there's, a lot that we can do, and that is really what we're going to be looking at, about how we can structure learning so that we can utilize these things rather than just having uploaded files all the time. Just before I carry on, how's my speed? Am I talking too fast for anybody? Good, excellent, thank you very much. Okay, so Moodle was made for learning, not just for content storage. And as I've already mentioned, when we're supporting teachers and promoting Moodle, we need to focus on the learning rather than the function. And Moodle is kind of based on that social constructivist model. And Martin has those 5 key areas, which I've just got on the slide. I'm not going to keep them up very long. These 5 key areas that Moodle is kind of based on for that constructivist model of developing content and ideas and supporting learning. I'm not going to read these here now. That you can see the link across the top there. I just always Google moodle.org pedagogy and I'll just find it. But it just kind of gives you that basis of where Moodle came from. And when I teach on the teach training courses, I talk about this with them, and then I kind of break it down into what that actually means for Moodle. So I kind of broke those 5 areas down into kind of 3 practical areas that teachers can kind of relate to a little bit as far as online learning is concerned. So sharing information, often the starting point, and I mentioned files, but then I go on to forums and databases and lessons and so on. And of course we want then students to construct this information rather than just watching it. So we want them to add information to databases, add stuff onto forums. And then looking at collaboration and kind of shared development. So we're looking at the wikis, and the chat rooms, workshops and glossaries is one of my particular favourites, which I'll come on to later. And then applying to individuals' needs. One of the things there is about adapting content, and of course with Moodle 2 now and activity completion and conditional activities, the ability to tailor a student's learning pathway according to what they've achieved is so much greater than it's ever been. And I think Moodle 2 is absolutely kind of key to learning online. I think it was much more difficult with Moodle 1. Moodle 2, there's stuff there that just helps us with that differentiation and kind of personalising the content to individuals. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. So we're going to be kind of looking at, it's more than just content. MOOCs, as we've all heard, I'm not going to be talking about MOOCs, but they're kind of a hot topic at the moment. You can't really go anywhere without hearing it. And a MOOC isn't just content. If it's a good MOOC, then it's online and it's distance learning, and there should be a good structure in it, because you can't learn without it. When you're in a classroom, the teacher provides that structure, provides that scaffolding to help students to understand, rather than just kind of shoving information at them and having to figure out for themselves. But of course, that is still quite a useful learning skill. But structure is really important, and that is the next kind of part of this presentation, is really looking at that structure. And I'm going to be using some kind of case studies in my journey through developing structure. Recently I've been making more and more online courses, and I've adapted what I think the structure should be based on how students are using those courses. So the very first Moodle course that I made that was designed to be supported or quite heavily used online, as opposed to being just kind of content to support the taught session. I used a structure of having an introduction, so really looking at the aims and objectives, what we were going to learn, Then having some resources to help to develop their understanding, so information, activities, that might be where your PDFs originally were and your PowerPoints. I would like to see more lessons and books and things using that. Then something to check their understanding, so applying the skills, testing their knowledges, quizzes again, and so on. And then maybe completing some tasks. That could be the assignments or the assessments that they have to complete, or going out and doing some research on something. So that was my first kind of basis of developing some online content. And I have just a quick picture here, an example one. So, so looking at developing understanding, I'm going to attempt to zoom this in. So starts off just with a little bit of an overview about kind of what they would learn. So here's what they would learn. And then looking at some content to introduce them to things. Good old PowerPoint in here. Some activities. So this Moodle course layout is actually a picture with a comments block, so it makes it a static page quite a bit more interactive without having to make anything in particular. And then looking at things like the glossaries and so on. So this was all about developing developing understanding, providing content to help them to learn something. And then what they would do is then we'd have something about checking learning, and as you'd probably guess, there's a good old quiz in there. So a little quiz for them to check their understanding, or more importantly for me to check their understanding. And then it links to their assessments and the information that they need to complete in order to complete the task, linking it back to the kind of the core course criteria. One of the other things that's really important when you're kind of doing online learning, but also I think equally important for any form of learning, is for students to kind of know where they're at and know where they're going, so that they can start to manage themselves and develop their independent learning skills, which is another kind of hot topic in UK education at the moment. And it's important that students can check their progress, and some of the things I really like, things like the checklist and the course completion activities. So I tend to build up my courses. Julian was saying earlier that blocks are great, they're useful for content. I tend to use them quite a lot for progress tracking, and so I use the course completion status, so I use the activity completion elements, and then certain elements are then linked to the course completion status block, so I love this block. And then one of my favourite plugins ever is the checklist. I absolutely love checklists. In fact, too much really, because I do tend to overload my courses with them, so I need to start streamlining my checklist a bit. But on this particular course, I've not used it for the whole course criteria. I've used it for different elements. So as they complete different elements of ready for assignment 1, it won't release their actual assignment submission space for assignment 1 until they've been through and done all the little tasks, and they've ticked that they've proofread it and checked it and referenced it properly and so on. So they kind of see their progress getting ready for that next stage. And similarly, for this particular example course, they have to make an online course as they're working through, and there are certain elements they have to include in it. So as they achieve those different elements, they're ticking it off, and they see their grow in here. So there's quite a lot that you can do with a checklist. Like I said, I kind of do a little bit too much. Here I've got a problem with the checklist in the folder. In order to show the progress bar. Yeah, I don't really use it with folders. I don't use folders because it doesn't use activity completion enough for me, so I don't bother using folders. We've also used the progress bar, but I found that it doesn't show it in the correct or in the kind of the logical order. So assignment 1 may not be first, it might be third, and it just doesn't feel that natural. And I haven't found the kind of workaround. Ah, sorry, technical. I don't know technical, Don. Sorry, I only know the front end. So that's kind of, the checking progress is quite important, and I use quite a few different skills to do that. And certainly when it's distance learning, that's something I do build in quite a lot to make sure that the students know where they are, and I can track where they're up to as well. So that was my first attempt at making an online course, that kind of checking understanding, developing understanding, and then kind of getting them to do the tasks. And then I made another one that particularly required collaboration and reflection. It was used for those people in the UK for IFL, and they wanted the reflection elements in it. So I needed some more collaborative elements and more reflection elements in it. So I've added an extra little kind of element to my structure to say that I wanted some reflection and collaboration. So it's about kind of applying or checking those ideas with others rather than just kind of passing quizzes or doing tasks and so on. So I used a range of different tools. So within this kind of second version, I did use things like activity completion and conditional activities. So it kind of changed the pathway for each individual as they were working through. So depending on how well they achieve something, it would release something else. So Julia mentioned it earlier. They do a quiz, and if they get 80%, then they'll move on to the next task. And if they get less than that, they're signposted to some extra resources so that they can get 80% next time and move on and so on. Also used it a little bit so that the students could choose their pathway. So there were opportunities for them to say, well, the area I'm interested in is this. They would pick that and it would release that pathway for that particular element. So I was able to make it much more personalised, and collaboration and reflection has been built in to enable that collaboration so that they can learn from the things that they've chosen, things that they've been doing, and that happens throughout rather than just at the end. And much like the game we just played on Julian's course, the good old activity completion was built into the forums. So the students had to both add a discussion and reply to a number of discussions before that was achieved. So it wasn't the case of just going clicking on it, it wasn't the case of just reading. They had to engage, they had to get involved, which was a really key part of what we were trying to achieve. So that was kind of stage 2. And again, I've got some little examples here. So here's an example of one using conditional activities. And I've picked an example here, actually. It's about a conditional activity about learning how to do conditional activities. So the idea here is that students were learning by doing, and they were kind of given a bit of an overview about what restricted access was in conditional activities. They'd already added some activities onto the course, and then they weren't able to move on to what to do next until they ticked it or completed certain elements. So I've shown you this as a teacher so you can kind of see what's available. But they would work through and it would release things, and again they had to kind of get involved in discussions. Back out again. These slides are all available by the way, so you can kind of zoom in and see them for yourself if you want to, and I'll tell you how you can get access to this course if you want it for yourself later. So the students started by learning by doing, which I think is important. I say students, this particular course was for teachers. It's about teachers learning how to develop their Moodle courses to support learning, so they were learning it by doing it. And then we looked at the collaboration. So we had an evaluation element in this one. They had to say about how the course could be improved. So they were reflecting on their learning experience, and then also then using the forums to discuss the applications of conditional activities. And there were two kind of core ones they had to engage with. So these were the two ones. They had to share their experiences as a student and then talk about how they would use it as a teacher, and you kind of see slightly the how many replies and things that we got, and then they started to move through, and they were all kind of saying this is a little bit more tricky. So some of them found it a little bit harder to do than others, but the great thing about this was the answers were all being given by each other. I mean, I was there watching, I was lurking to jump in if anybody was really needing the help, but mostly they helped each other. So they gives that differentiation, that scaffolding, it enables the students who do understand to mentor the students that don't. So it's a good learning skill to that stretch and challenge at all levels. So that worked really, really well. And this idea of this reflection and collaboration worked so well. This particular example was a case of 60 teachers from 10 different organisations across the UK who all collaborated together. So they weren't people in the same organisation. They were people from all over the place. So they were really sharing from each other. And from this activity, they actually did then help to apply. I've always found that if we use the tools in the teaching of the students, the teachers, then they would be more likely using the students. So for example, instead of telling them what a wiki is, I get them using a wiki, and then I find them much more likely to use that wiki with the students rather than me just saying how great it is, but then they don't necessarily take that step into actually using it in the classroom. And that's what this course was kind of applied on. That's what it kind of was based on, to look at that integration. The really key thing about this course was that they applied it. It wasn't about learning, it was about learning and applying. So the simple structure of adding introductions and learning content and reflection and collaboration is used as a structure for some of our blended learning courses. So our typical courses that we have at the college, where they've taken the step from the good old list of resources, that's the type of structure that they're developing and using to provide a little bit more structure and content to their courses. As you'd expect, not all teachers are doing the learning pathways and all the conditional activities, but they're starting to at least break it up with labels so it's not just such a great big long list of resources. But then I started to do more fully distance online learning, and it wasn't enough just to do that. It needed a bit more. It needed a little bit more structure in order to be able to really support a student who I wasn't seeing at any point in time. The connection I had was only online, and I couldn't kind of gauge what was happening kind of face to face as you can in a normal classroom situation. So I developed it a little bit further. We still got our introduction and you look at what the aims and objectives are. But then I've got an initial or diagnostic assessment. So it's finding out what they know now. And one of the ways I'm hopefully going to be developing this is using this games-based idea. And I'd like some games-based fun assessments as for some of our learners, rather than it being a formal assessment, because it would just mean that they were getting a true picture of exactly how they're applying and using the skills, rather than just whether they can answer some questions. And by doing that, that would release the content that those students need based on their level of understanding. So rather than a student always going through the same pathway as everybody else, it's actually adapting to what the students actually need. Then we will be looking at the learning content. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the learning content in a moment, checking understanding, looking at the assessment and achievement, and of course I'm going to mention badges and then looking again at that reflection and target setting. So the introduction I've already mentioned, and whilst I go through this, I'm just going to mention a few of the activities that we use, just for those people who may be a little bit newer to Moodle or some tools that you may not have used before. So for the introduction, the outcomes, we go pretty simple. So section description, could be a label, could be a page, depending how long it is. But also I've started to use audio files, but also video trailers, good old iMovie on the iPad. We've started making these 1-minute video trailers that introduce a topic and explain the concept, and we found that so far students are quite enjoying them. It really sets the scenes. It's quite good fun. So so the introduction doesn't have to just be text and of what the actual section's all about, of course, all about. Then the diagnostic assessment. So I mentioned it could be just a simple quiz, or it could be a whole section of activities. So we could use the conditional activities, look at making it games-based, of course, avoiding badges. Does anybody remember, Mike, put your hand up, or yes, it's something called a Choose Your Own Adventure book. It may be something that is just UK-based, I'm not really sure. But we used to have, oh, some hands going up, yay! When I talk to people at college about this, they don't know what I'm talking about. So Choose Your Own Adventure, for those that don't know, was a book, good old-fashioned book, and you used to read a chapter, and at the end of the chapter, it used to ask you a question. So you kind of been part of the story, and then you'd be asked a question, for example, do you want to meet the wizard or do you want to run away? If you want to meet the wizard, then go to page 52. If you want to run away, go to page 9. And then you would go to that page, and your story would be different depending on the choices that you made. You win, Gavin. So we could do that very, very easily in Moodle. You know, the conditional activities, lessons, we can very easily make that kind of choose your own pathway or choose your own adventure game-based assessment, so it doesn't feel quite so much like a test. Then we would move on to the learning content, and this is the really key area for me. This is where I think it's really important. It could be information, it could be a learning activities, hopefully it would be interactive and collaborative, but this could very easily end up being just a set of resources, but this is where design can really benefit online learning. So in the classroom, you, as the teacher, you can control what's happening. You can see your audience, and this is what I'm having trouble with here. I don't really know how many of you are bored or if you're engaged or not. You could be yawning, half you could be off making a cup of tea. I have no idea because I can't see you, and that's, I think, often a challenge for teachers when they're using online, but it's something we really have to be aware of when students are learning away from the computer. So we can't adapt it based on that body language. Oh, good. Some people fully focused. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Can't use your body language to check what's going on. Asking questions at pertinent times can be added in, but you can't adapt it. It's very much structured once it's online, and therefore adapting the content as required. And that can be done to a certain extent. So in Moodle, the content's delivered at the pace of the student's own pace. They choose it, and ideally we need to build in some kind of questioning or activity to assess their understanding as they go along, and that really is where conditional activities can be extremely useful. And one of my favourite tools for this are lessons. Lessons are something I use quite a lot, and this can be used perfectly. Someone mentioned it earlier for how to use a lesson activity. This would be a perfect choose your own adventure book for a lesson, but similarly it can be just kind of a checking their knowledge as they go along. So instead of a PowerPoint method, you just click through the lesson, but at least ask them some questions as they're going along and just adapt that learning pathway depending on kind of what we're doing. When I'm referring to learning content, yes, I am thinking both resources and activities. It really is all the information. So in a classroom, it could be the teacher delivering, or it could be a classroom-based activity. And I believe we need a bit of both in order to give that content. But every subject, every teacher, every kind of experience is likely to be different. But as well as lessons to give content, we can look at books and glossaries because they can offer media-rich content. So you can embed your YouTube video in it very, very easily. You can add your pictures. Comment blocks are something someone else mentioned. I think they're great. So instead of there just being a piece of text on a page, they have to actually talk about it. So watch a video and then talk about the information that's in it, ask questions, answer each other's questions. I guess you could also do the same, embedding a video into top of a simple forum, and then they could just put the questions and answers underneath as well. So you can start to kind of engage with other stuff. It doesn't have to only be reading content. And then checking understanding. So there's lots of tools we can use for that. We've got quizzes, which is kind of the main thing that people tend to think about when testing understanding. But we've got glossaries. So glossaries are a fantastic tool to enable students to add content. So they could just be using the glossary content, but one of the biggest ways that we use glossaries is for students to go away with certain keywords that they need to go and investigate and research. They go off and find it, they add it into the glossary, they reference it correctly, and then we issue out the words again, and the students verify each other's information. So by the end of a session or a couple of sessions, how long you extend it over, you've got a glossary of terms they can use throughout the year, but the students are more likely to remember those ones that they have input themselves. So we tend to differentiate it and give the keywords out to people depending on their kind of initial level of understanding. Sometimes we just give them complete choice, and we just list all the words in a choice activity, then pick the word that they want, go off and research it and add it to the glossary so that we can kind of use it in a few different ways. Wikis, forums. I'm trying to keep an eye on the kind of the questions list on the right hand side, but I'm getting distracted, so I should come back later and ask you some questions. So reflective journals, guided learning activities is a term that we use to basically set activities on Moodle, but the students then go and complete it away from Moodle. So, for example, they have to go off and research some information in the library. Books are still important. Go off and do some research using different things, and then come back and add it to Moodle. So they're not spending the entire time always looking at the Moodle screen. So that's kind of what we refer to as guided learning activities. Mahara, of course, Mahara can be used as a way of really presenting quite a range of media and showing their understanding in a nice creative way. And also providing opportunities to apply skills and offer collaborative skill activities such as forums and so on. Of course, the checking understanding will really vary according to the subject area, because if it's a very practical subject, the applying skills might be actually in a salon or something. So they could watch a video about cutting skills and then go off and apply that in the salon. So the opportunity to apply skills may again also happen offline, but some of them could apply online as well. Sometimes, or quite often I think, the learning content and the checking understanding will link together. For me, the two should kind of go side by side. As they're going through the learning content, you should be checking their understanding. So they don't have to be as two separate kind of elements of the structure. And I feel it's best when it's kind of put together. But again, it will depend on the particular topic that you're delivering. Assessment and achievement. I'm aware of time, so I'm going to start rushing through. Assessment and achievement. Again, I've mentioned some of these bits and pieces, but of course we probably want some badges or certificates for recognition, enabling the students to recognise where they've got to, and things like the progress bars or the course completion status or checklists to see how far they're getting through as well. So not just recognition, but kind of tracking their own progress. And then reflection and target setting. We've already talked about this quite a bit earlier on, so kind of collaborative elements, perhaps doing some personal reflection, feedback surveys we do sometimes for them to reflect on kind of how they've learnt information. And also checklists again. We've started to use them for student input on the checklists, and they make their own checklist. So as they're working through kind of tasks and things, they're setting their own little targets and a checklist and then ticking them off as they go along. So it brings it back to that kind of independent and personalised learning. So the structure is really important. We do have to make sure that it's not just stuff on a page though. Structure is still important as far as how the course is laid out. So we've already talked, a lot of people have talked about how templates aren't good, but it is important to think about how the course is laid out, using labels and so on. Some guidance on use. I mean, a lot of students may not know how to get through a Moodle course. And one of the things that we're currently making is a game, like a navigation game, so they have to kind of click on buttons to navigate themselves around a section of Moodle in order to be able to get used to things like the breadcrumb menus and the navigation block or the course menus or whatever navigation feature you use. So before they can start using the course, they have this little short game to kind of get them used to navigating their way around. And tracking, which I've also already mentioned a few times, so the students know where they currently are and where they're going, and really helping them to look at developing things. Okay, so if it is distance learning, we need to make sure that it doesn't become too distant. And you're seeing my very scary face on the screen here. But what I do when it's distance learning is I put a little YouTube video in there that's 30 seconds long, just saying hello and just kind of putting a face to the name of the content. And just it really helps, I think, the students who aren't away, aren't with you, to kind of have someone that they feel that they can talk to rather than always just being computer all the time. So I always do this little kind of intro. So it offers a bit of a friendly face, enabling quite a number of communication tools. So I offer usually a range of different tools. So it could be one-to-one feedback, chat rooms, discussion areas, and then also, of course, instructions of how to use those communication tools to make sure that they are familiar with them. And by you doing that as well, would hope that it would also encourage collaboration, not just between the student and the teacher, but also between the students and the students. So this all works quite well for distance learning, and it would certainly help for blended learning, I believe. But how many teachers would actually do that much development for a course that they're actually teaching face-to-face? It does take time to look at that development. But is there actually any value to having this approach in a blended learning situation? And how do we go from that great big list of content that we've already seen to something with a little bit more structure so it doesn't feel quite so kind of lengthy? And that's just going to be my last little bit really of this session, is just really kind of thinking about the practical steps we could do to take it from that great big list into something a little bit more structure without saying to teachers, you've got to spend hours right now on Moodle doing this. So one of the things I ask teachers to do is to, okay, put your PowerPoints on there, put your information on there, but put it on there in the order you're going to use them in your lesson and deliver them from Moodle. Don't load them up from your private storage area or your memory stick. Load them up on Moodle, so you're starting to see the structure and the students see how it relates to students, to their course. So the students start to see Moodle as part of their course rather than something the teacher just refers to. They get used to seeing it, and the teacher gets used to seeing it as part of the structure, part of the element. So that's quite an easy fix, and quite a lot of our staff don't really kind of worry about that. They think, yeah, no, that makes sense, I can do that, I'm putting them on anyway. I'm just going to label them up with the different kind of lesson resources. Personally, I hate week 1, week 2, week 3 labels in a course because I can't remember when week 1 was. I want to know it by topic that relates to the work that I'm doing. But it's for us a really nice way of just taking that step without it looking like a really big step, because if it feels too much of a big step for teachers, that's enough of a barrier for them not to do it at all. So kind of we've lost them again for a few weeks. Once they've done that, we start to encourage them to ditch the PowerPoints and create books instead. I love it when the staff come up to me and moan to me saying, oh, why can't I update the PowerPoint on the screen? And I said, well, no, you can't do that, and kind of explain the reasons why. I said, but if you make it into a book, updating it is really, really easy. Similar with Word documents when they say the same thing. So I first of all sell it from the point of view of it's much easier to update and edit when you need to. But then also it's naturally presented straight from Moodle rather than storage space. And then also it can easily integrate media in a much easier way than PowerPoint. So embedding a YouTube PowerPoint is much easier than it is in a book than it is in PowerPoint. So we kind of sell those particular things. But once they've done that, we can then start to sell a few extra features. For example, the glossaries then tend to come into play. We say, well, actually, if you've got your book and now you've got your glossary, it will auto-link. So when your students are stuck, they can click on that word and they'll see the entry. But if you do that with a PowerPoint, it won't work. So it just kind of gives that step-by-step kind of development of adding content to a Moodle course that's starting to support the student rather than just being storage content. And then when they say, oh, it takes ages to make the glossary, say, oh, okay, that's a great activity for the students to complete, and explain how they can do that. And that usually is something that a lot of teachers do take up, because a lot of courses do have terminology and would really value having a glossary. And if the students are making it, then all the better. And I always do this, and then I share that glossary with other groups so that I don't have to make it again. And then the next one we look at is saying, well, how many of you I'll ask you, how many of you asked your students to go off and make a PowerPoint presentation in groups? So 4 of them sat around a computer, making a PowerPoint presentation. Quick show of hands. Please, all yeses. Yep, lots of hands. Okay. And then, lots of hands, quite a few hands. How many of you have the experience of a few students saying, one student sat doing the work and all the other students just sat around behind them watching rather than contributing? Anybody experienced that ever? Quite a lot more hands going on that way. So what we try to suggest is Wiki, and we've got Google Docs here, but of course I'm only going to be talking about Moodle in this particular instance, but Google Docs also does it. So we suggest a wiki instead. So the advantage there is we can see everything that they're doing. They can easily embed a range of media. It makes it look like a little web page, and they might be more likely to make web pages in the future. So that's one way we kind of get them using a wiki. So again, we're looking at it from the point of view of what the students are doing and learning activities rather than the Moodle concept. Also, similarly, we got kind of recording, sending students out, send them off to the library to go and find information, but rather than bringing them back, getting them to put that information on the computer or on their iPads, wherever they are, so getting them to collaborate away from the lesson rather than everything always having to kind of come back to that session the whole time. Okay, the other last one we kind of look at doing is we're trying currently to ditch the spreadsheets. I'm fed up of spreadsheets being in people's personal storage areas and the students and the teachers not knowing kind of where the students are up to. So ditch a spreadsheet, pop it onto Moodle. The Gradebook is great, but it is a little bit kind of difficult to use sometimes. But there are some big advantages to doing all the grades in Gradebook because everyone can see it. But I tend to encourage use of the course completion status for a really lovely visual tracker rather than the gradebook. If they want to delve down to the grades, they can, but I encourage the use of course completion instead. So we want to encourage the development over time. It'd be lovely if everyone had all the time to sit down and make online courses that are amazing, but practically a teacher doesn't have that time. So we sell the benefits for the function and enable them to develop it over time. We're very lucky. We have a support team. I have a team that enables, that will create and add content for teachers. So we're really, really lucky. If you're lucky enough to have that, then, or you have the facility to enable it in some way, then it's something. I'm sorry, I'm gonna make a lot of people jealous. But it's something, you know, let the teachers be the experts in their fields and let some other people be experts in theirs. Moodle is great. Moodle doesn't need to have an expert, I believe. But it doesn't take much of a barrier for people to opt out, and I think this is something that's really helped us to look at developing. And also MOOCs, I've already mentioned, MOOCs may not be your goal. You know, these kind of ideas, you know, may be a little bit grand for some of the blended learning options. But how about the flipped classroom? So these concepts of a structured set of activities could easily be applied to flipped learning, homework activities, or activities that happen prior to the taught session to enable a bit of learning to take place so the lesson can be really supporting the individual student. So you can very much apply this idea of structure and a number of activities working together to the flipped classroom, homework activities, or even just a little kind of a topic of work. So it doesn't have to always be looking at that distance learning approach. And the general concept there is then that if iMoodle and the students can Moodle, and we can all Moodle together, so we can all come back together. And that ends my presentation. I hope that wasn't too fast. And I have one question here already, so I shall I'll answer that one. How many I have in my team per students lecturers? Oh, it's a tiny amount. We have about 300 lecturers in the college, and I have full-time equivalent, because they're all part-time, 3 staff who would support it. But we, we do everything we can, and we want to do everything we can to support it. And a lot of it doesn't take that long, really. It's getting the information from the staff. So it works for us, and it doesn't have to be a big team. But I know we're very lucky to have that. Some other people mentioned as well about the Wiki in Moodle. I have to agree, I don't like the Wiki in Moodle. We used to use OU Wiki, which I loved. I loved the templates in it. It was much more user-friendly, and it's just not supported anymore, unfortunately. But we haven't stopped us using the Wiki, because I do like how it integrates with other things in Moodle. But I agree that the Wiki could be better. We'll see what happens in the future. Thank you so much for all your comments, everyone. That's really sweet. Thank you. I'm glad you have some ideas to take away. Any other questions? We do have Mahara, yeah, and we're beginning to use it much more. We started using it much more for the media. They've really taken it on, and also for childcare. So they're starting to make pages and kind of get information together. Some of them are using it for group collaboration, so they're using it to create shared pages, and some are using it as a portfolio to present their units of work, and then presenting that or submitting that to the teacher in controlled groups. We use it in various different ways. No, don't use Mahara assignments. We're on Moodle 2.4. I've never got it working. I'd love it. I'm guessing you're talking about the assignment to the Mahara assignment tool, which allows you to kind of link the assessments together in the two, but I've never got it working, unfortunately. So we do it the old-fashioned way of the students take the hyperlink and paste it into an online text assignment, or an assignment with an online text submission area, and that's how we kind of put the link in together. What's the fastest way to get a teacher from a Moodle novice to Moodle guru? Oh gosh, that's a hard one. One of the things that we have found is we started our medals, and there were quite a few staff who were very motivated by getting a Moodle medal, and so quickly went through bronze, silver and gold to be the first people to get a Moodle medal. So that worked quite well initially, but it soon eased off. It was only really the really keen staff who did that. It'd be interesting to see if badges, we could do something similar with badges and getting personal achievement rather than course-based achievement. But we also have a qualification called Delivering Learning Using a VLE, and the idea is that teachers learn about the benefits of using a VLE and create an online course at the same time. So that's quite a good fast-track way of them kind of using Moodle as a student. So they often benefit a lot more by doing it as a student, and then actually applying them. Flipped classroom. That is kind of relatively new kind of model, really, that we're starting to apply. The idea is a lot of the time the teachers will deliver introductory content, so a picture a lesson, teachers standing there delivering their PowerPoint, doing their talk delivery of a new topic as an example, and the students kind of do some classroom activities. Then they go away and they complete their assessments on their own. So if they're stuck, they can go back and speak to the teacher, but the teacher's kind of not there for that element. With a flipped classroom, the concept is that they do that general introduction, that core information, that the teacher's just giving the same information out to every student in the lesson, do that bit before the talk session. So they do that bit online. The use of videos is heavily kind of suggested in flipped learning, so either teacher-created videos or YouTube videos and so on, or the structure as I've kind of outlined here. So they would do that prior to the lesson, get that core content together, and then come to the lesson to work on the assessments or developing the understanding or applying their knowledge. And the teacher is able to support them at their own levels, is able to group them much more and do a bit more differentiation to support them to achieve at their own level, rather than the teacher always doing the same kind of delivery to everybody. Does that explain flipped learning enough? Reading more of the questions. Not with large classes. Thank you. I haven't done it with large classes. I've done it with a couple of groups of about one was 12, one was 8. So they were quite small classes, and they were adults, and they're perhaps a little bit more motivated. But we're kind of trying the idea of something called supported flip. So there would be a non-specialist and member of teaching staff there to support, facilitate and motivate the students online. So if they get stuck or need information or guidance to work through the online learning, then there's somebody there. But the idea is that you're not using the subject expert there because they're trying to learn by themselves. So I think that could work for us, younger learners. Any other questions? Oh, I promised I put the video back on, didn't I? Oh, my halo's back. Hello. So any other final questions? Lots of good comments here. So I'm glad this is recorded because I can go through and watch all the comments, which will be fantastic. So, hey. Oh, yes, thank you. And actually, that was my very last slide. Thank you very much, Paula. So all of those things that I'm told, there's an online course that I created called Teaching with Moodle 2. I've just seen this one in collaborative training, collaboration and reflection. And the idea is that it teaches you about Moodle 2. It's based on Moodle 2.2. But the idea is that you learn about what's different in Moodle 2, including the file management, which was a discussion on one of the forums the other day, conditional activity completion, conditional activities, course completion, and so on. And you learn it by being the student and then actually adding content to a course to enable you to do it. And that's shared on the Mooch. So if you go on to the Mooch, and if you go on to the Keynote space, I've put links into all of this. You can go to the Mooch and you can either visit the demo site, which is on our Moodle site, which I'll explain in a moment, or you can download your own version. But if you like the idea of going into the one where all those discussions have already happened and you want to kind of look at what other people have said, there's also a link to something called our Moodle site, our community Moodle site. And again, there's a link on the screen, and you can go into that particular course there, and there's already people who've done that work, so you can kind of use the ideas from them. You will have to create an account on this site in order to access it and interact with it, but it's just an open site. Where we'll go to at STC in the next few years. I think we're going to end up doing a little bit more distance learning and online learning, and particularly using it for something called stretch and challenge, which is a kind of something we talk about a lot at the moment. So enabling students to develop their knowledge further. So you know, the students have to get to a certain point, but we want those students who are able to extend that skill further, and I think that's where technology can really kind of help. That's, I think, where our next kind of element will be. And badges is going to be used in a big way in July. Our CPD day, we have a technology day every single summer, and our CPD day this year is called the Martini Way, and it's all about kind of end time, anywhere, any place, training, Moodling, and also looking at shaking up your Moodle course to make it into a bit of a game using badges, or stirring it just to add a little bit more structure into it. So we're going to kind of make it kind of a bit of fun, but hopefully students are really going to benefit by having better Moodle courses. And Bootstrap, yes, definitely, Gareth, we are looking at Bootstrap, but the ability not to dock blocks is, for me at the moment, is that we won't go to Bootstrap. Our developer wants Bootstrap, and so do I, to be honest, Bootstrap for our latest release in the summer, but docking blocks is really important now. So I don't really want to do it if we can't dock the blocks. But we might use it perhaps as a mobile theme or something like that, or an optional theme for students. Okay, well, I think that's probably it. So if anyone's got any other questions, I'm on Twitter at Becky Barrington, so feel free to tweet me there. Of course, there's a discussion area on the Keynote space, so I will be in there if you want to start any discussions, or keep an eye on it. If you haven't been into the Keynote area, go in and get your badge. And hopefully I'll see all of you in more rooms at the iMoot, which I'm thoroughly enjoying. Thank you.
And let me jump in. Shane here again. Just to say thank you once again, Becky, for that amazing presentation. Been watching Twitter stream as well. It's just going crazy. So, and obviously the chat in here. So thank you so much for your time. And a reminder to everyone else, it is recorded, so we'll be able to watch this back, especially for that chat, because it was going so fast. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye. Good night. Good day to everybody.
You are currently the only person in this conference.